Hello, it's Dawn Michelle, and welcome back to my channel. And here with me today is over here is
On this end. On this end.
is my good friend Lisa Pepez, who I'm sure you all know and love like I do.
Aw.
Today we're continuing our tarot and practice series.
Yep.
And we are talking about planning and tarot
Yeah.
and anything adjacent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Journaling, planning, all the things we do to record and track and stuff.
Yeah. And prep for a new year, because I think that that's a thing that a lot of people like are looking at, I think, around this time of year, like
Yeah.
getting ready. There's something about that turn of the new year, right? Where it's like
Yeah.
that blank slate, that fresh start. So like if you're gonna make changes,
Yep.
that's
It's
the
like
time.
the best time to like shake up the routine. It's also the best time, I think, to like set goals for like things you want to accomplish in your practice that you want to tackle. I feel like in the year,
Mhm.
it's a good time. And it's very exciting. I look forward to this time every single year. And it starts like I feel like end of October.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
suddenly it's like you're getting the emails about planners coming out and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, oh, it's time. I get to start setting things up and getting started. It's the
I was
best.
gonna say, because I think that's when all the planners start releasing is
Yep.
like end of October, beginning of November, and it's like it goes full on into like planner season.
Yep.
There's like Halloween season, there's like Christmas, Yule, end of the year season, and in between, that is
Planner
planner
season.
season.
100%. Yep. Yep.
So do you do any planning like around your tarot practice itself, like what you were talking about, like goals or what you want to accomplish maybe in the upcoming year?
Yeah, I do a lot. Like it's all embedded. Like for me, the tarot is part of my life planning, I guess. So it's all to me, it's all in one kind of bucket. But yeah, I definitely plan things. I like to set goals for myself for the upcoming year as far as like maybe big studies I want to do or decks I want to get to know better or spend time with, that kind of thing. I like to think of the big picture stuff around this time of year where I'm thinking like, yeah, what kind of stuff do I want to accomplish if I have the time
Right.
and can dedicate the attention to it? Like what would be like, and almost always at the beginning of the year, I get myself into something that I will probably fall off of by halfway through the year at least, but I always try to get into something,
Yeah.
So I do that. And then like just the daily, I do a lot of daily draws and I do a lot of, wow, I feel like this is I feel like I could list for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's good because it gives people ideas about maybe things that they might want to think about, as they're making adjustments to their own like plans for next year. They can think about things they
Yeah.
might want to add.
Yeah. Like in my planner, I feel like I always do at the beginning of the year or usually near the end of the previous year, I do like a year ahead spread and I like to sort of track
I
those
was
energies.
gonna ask you about year ahead spreads.
Yep. That's probably the very first tarot related thing that goes in my planner each year is my year ahead spread. And I also like to also plan my year, not plan my year, but kind of have as a focal point for my year, my tarot card of the year. Do you do that?
I don't, but we definitely need to circle back at some point to year ahead spreads because I have
Yeah.
feelings about those.
Let's
So
talk about it right now.
you want to talk about it right now?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I did the year ahead spread thing for years. It was part of my like setting up for the new year, right? In my tarot journals and whatnot, and kind of like getting my planning and my practice in order. And I found that for me, every time I worked with whatever card, like the initial year ahead is like great. I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like this, I love it, whatever. So then when I try to bring it into practice as like a focus card for each month, I swear I did my damnedest to like manifest that card.
That's
It
the
was
danger.
in my head, and like this happened for like several years before I realized like I think I'm manifesting this card. I think because it's in my brain of,
Yep.
maybe particularly if it was like something that was a bit more challenging, like, oh my god, you got the Tower card
Or the 10 of swords
or
or
the
the 5
Ten
of
of Swords,
cups. Yep.
right? So I would, if that was in my year ahead spread, I was like, I feel like I was manifesting that. I was looking for it everywhere throughout
Yeah.
the whole month, and
That's a huge
felt like
danger.
I never felt like I was able to like really disconnect from that.
It's
Do you have
interesting
that
because
at all?
I offer I actually do year ahead readings for clients. So I get them booked around this time of the year. And when I'm doing those, I actually end up talking for like probably 10 freaking minutes about how important it is to not give up your power when you get a reading like this, and to see it, instead of seeing it like this is what's fated to happen to you in this month, which is not the point to me of a year ahead spread.
Right, right.
But instead to approach it as literally the same way you would approach checking the weather. For if you could check the weather a year ahead and go, okay, I know this month's probably going to be a little bit on the rainy side, and this one's going to be sunny, and this one's going to be like, you know, we're going to have some snow or whatever. I like to think of it like having a heads up that there could be some twists and turns in that month, but literally the same way that if it's raining, if you know ahead of time it's raining and you bring an umbrella, you're going to stay dry, right? If you don't bring an umbrella, you're going to get rained on. So if you see the Tower card coming up in a year ahead, or another difficult card, and you're like, oh, great, guess my tower is going to fall down. Well, then you're not working with the spread properly. Not properly, I shouldn't say properly, because this is just my way, sort of how I see it. But if you let it just kind of dictate how things are going to go, instead of seeing it as a heads up that you can then engage differently with, like if I know I've got a tower coming up, I can actually be aware in the months leading up that, hey, maybe I can avoid this tower by being self-aware and like paying attention to people in my life, or like wherever the tower might be showing up.
Right.
So yeah, but I will say when I first began doing year ahead spreads, I really struggled with that exact same thing. I'd be like, I just abdicate my power. Like, I guess this is just how the month is going to be, which is why I'm so intentional with it now. Now I just treat it like this is an interesting heads up. And I kind of keep a half eye on it in the same way. You know what it reminds me of, actually, the way I work with it now? It's more like the way that I was kind of engaging with the Decan walk when I was not totally falling off the wagon. Or I would see the Decan as interesting information. Let's see where it happens to show up. But I was just curious about it. I wasn't attached to it. I wasn't like expecting things along that Decan to happen. I was just like, it's an interesting exercise to see if anything happens to align. Right. But it was data, as opposed to something that I felt like was like predicted, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know. No, it totally makes sense. Yeah. And I haven't done one, like, to be fair, like, I'm not really knocking your ahead readings. Like,
no.
Because I think there is definite value in them. It's just that at the time in my life that I was doing them, I was relying too heavily on the spread itself and the information I was getting from it, and not focusing on where I was in control of it. Like you said, abdicating your power to it. And I think I would just like get up in my head about it. Or also it could have been partially that like I was trying to give it some validity.
I was just going to say, there could be like a desire to like see how it could be true, and therefore kind of look for the truth in it. It's kind of like, if you're looking for the positive, you'll find it. But if you're looking for the negative, you'll also find it. Like that's true of life, like in general. So it totally makes sense. And honestly, daily draws can be the exact same trap.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
There was a really interesting talk by T. Susan Chang at the Northwest Tarot Symposium, I think the first year I went. And that was her entire premise of this talk. It was a fantastic presentation. But she was literally talking about how we often will get a daily draw and we'll see that. And this is probably where I got that from. I can't think of anywhere else that I would have gotten this from. But she said, you'll see it and you'll just kind of take that as like, oh, I guess this is what's happening to me today. As opposed to, how can I engage with this in a proactive and empowered way? And then you change the narrative around it. But like, for sure, for me, I feel like year ahead spreads are kind of, I approach them very in an unattached way. And I don't spend a lot of energy or time like leaning back into it. Like I might, if I remember sometime in the month, go back and go, what was my card of the month? I wonder what that was. Right. But I don't, I feel like I'm much more distanced from them than I used to be. But I used to have that exact same issue.
Yeah. It's funny because I don't have that issue with daily card pulls. I do them all the time. And I'm just like, oh, cool. That's just something to be aware of today. And I don't. But for whatever reason, I would get up all in my head about the year ahead. Like it was this big looming thing that I was like, okay.
Because you can see it coming from so far away. It's like, if you know the tower's coming in July, you're thinking about it January, February, March, April, May, June. And like, okay, what's going to be the tower? Like, yeah. Sometimes it's not good to look too far ahead. It's kind of knowing yourself too, and whether you benefit from it or not. But that's why I go on and on about it when I do it for clients, is I'm like, just remember, this is just, this is a way you can engage with this, but like, don't let it run you. Like,
right. Yeah.
It's easy to do.
Yeah, it is. Do you, so do you work with your own personal year ahead reading throughout the year? Or is it kind of just like a
to me, it's more like if at the beginning of the year I got an astrological reading for the year, like what are the major transits coming up in the year. In fact, there's the astrology podcast. They do this every year. If you watch your rising sign, they do this like long video and they tell you what your major transits are in the year ahead for your rising sign, like for people that have a similar house placement to you. And I've made a habit actually every year of watching that and making notes on it. And that's, I handle that the exact same way. It's like, oh, interesting. There could be some twists and turns here or there. It's more of a beginning of the year practice that I might occasionally refer back to than it is a year-long practice that I'm constantly engaging with.
That's kind of what I was asking. Like, is it something that's kind of just like preparatory for the upcoming year, or is it something that you know, continually check back in with?
It's more preparatory, and I occasionally refer back to it out of curiosity, you know? Yeah. And sometimes it can be helpful, I think, for getting the feel of a year and where, like, if I do a year ahead spread and I see a bunch of like really positive or successful cards at a certain point, like let's say summertime is looking really successful, that's going to tell me that I need to not be too, I need to not slack off in the early winter or like late winter, early spring, right? I need to like make sure I'm doing those pieces so I can guarantee those successful things are going to come. Or like, so I can kind of look at it as almost like a bell curve of the year and like kind of getting a general idea of when I want, or like you could plan product releases. Like I'm working on decks. Like it could be like, oh, hey, this might be a good year or a good month to launch that Kickstarter campaign. So I can use it for things like that. In the same way that I feel like somebody would refer to like a farmer's almanac to like figure out when's the best time to plant and harvest. Kind of like that.
Good analogy. I like that. Your year ahead is basically your personal farmer's almanac.
Yeah.
I love that. Maybe I should try one this year. Like try it and see if I can actually like not engage to that level.
And maybe change it. Like when you do your year ahead, one thing that could help potentially is to do it with a deck that you consider to be incredibly neutral or like pippish. Like if you have a deck that you tend to go to for like really objective, maybe less interpersonal kinds of readings so that you can just kind of do a vibe check for the year with those cards, that might be easier than pulling out a deck that you might associate with where you might lean heavily into the artwork and the scenes and like really think of it in like interpersonal relationship ways. It might be better to look at something that's more objective or like
a little bit more broad.
I would think deck. Yeah. More pulled back.
Yeah.
More distance.
Yeah. I know a lot of people do year aheads. They're real, I know they're real popular in terms of you know, getting professional readings. I mean, I've had them done many times and I find that like, that's always really, really interesting. And I feel like for me personally, I don't get, maybe this is like a light bulb moment for me. I don't get as like manifesty the energy if somebody else does it for me. I know myself, it's like I get all up in my head about it, but I feel like if somebody else does it, I can be more objective. So that's probably the case for me, like having a professional year ahead reading done.
It can be really great because then you're not pulling your own subjectivity into it the same way.
Yeah.
If you do one for yourself too, something else you could do if you know that this is a tendency you have is to pull an oracle deck that, for example, doesn't have a lot of those big scary cards, but can give you again that vibe check for the year. Like so, I like Sacred Creators would be really great for that, or your Finders Keepers, or something like that. Something that's going to give you that like kind of like, that kind of energetic.
Yeah, that would be cool. More of an energetic than and less of a predictive.
Yeah, and I think that's good for anybody watching who's also does this is like pull an oracle deck, pull an affirmation deck that's going to be positive no matter what, but then we'll give you kind of different things you might want to focus on each month. So there's different ways you can engage with it so that you can kind of meet yourself where you are that way and not,
That's cool. That's a good idea because like I'm fascinated by them. You know, of course, as somebody who works with tarot, you're like, and I've done them for years and years. Same as like I do a reading on my birthday every year, right?
Yeah.
But it's always so interesting how I think also where I'm at in my life tends to dictate, I think, how my interaction with the year ahead reading goes. But that's also true for just reading tarot in general, right?
Yeah, totally.
Your emotional landscape, that all sets the stage for the type of reading that you're going to get.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So have you been doing your head readings for a long time, or is it a newer, like for you personally?
I'm thinking, like I feel like I've been doing them for a long time. but I mean, I'd say at least the last 5 or 6 years, maybe longer.
Do you
And
feel
I
like
know I used to do them way back when too, but there was a big gap where I wouldn't have been for
that,
sure.
do you feel like that helps you like kind of get maybe not so much just like life overview, but just kind of helps you get in the frame of mind of what you might be wanting to work with in terms of tarot for the next year? Is it kind of like a tarot preparatory thing as well?
I don't know if I get that from my year ahead. I don't think I get that from my year ahead, really. I think, you know what I like to do with my year ahead is use this. It's been a really great way for me to work with a deck that I've otherwise struggled to bond with, or that I want to work with in that slower way, because then I can use it kind of as a very low key kind of deck study, like the Wildwood, for example. If I put my year ahead with the Wildwood, then every month, if I feel like I want to refer back, I'm going to refer back to the guidebook and be like, oh, what is that card in this deck again? I did it last year with, I guess that's this year, with the Dark Goddess Tarot.
Mm-hmm.
And that was great, because then that's the kind of deck that I feel like works really well for single card like readings like that. And I would sit with it and I could tease out different meanings, and there was more layers to it. But as far as like determining, like, you mean like what I want to do in my tarot practice, that kind of thing?
I don't know, just like this is such a like a it's weird constructy thing I'm like trying to verbalize here. Like, is it like a gateway into kind of like, okay, I'm going to do my year ahead spread, so that gets me in the mindset of the things that I want to do. So not necessarily like
Oh,
not necessarily dictating what you want to do in the next year, but does it help to shift your mindset and your framework from what I'm doing currently in my tarot practice to maybe what I want to do later on in the
yeah.
next year?
Yeah, like in the same way that I feel like I look for sort of themes, or like I look for trends or patterns. So like if I'm doing a year ahead and I see a ton of fire, it's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
creative push this year for sure. Or if I see a lot of water, it's like leaning into relationships or whatever it might be that I see. So I look at the elements, or I look at clumps of numbers. If I see a lot of threes, that's a lot of expansion. If I see a lot of fours, it's a lot of like steady Eddie, you know? So it
Yeah.
just kind of depends. So I kind of like feel like I read the energy of it like that. And
Yeah.
then based on that, thinking about the year as a whole in that sort of big picture way
Mm-hmm.
does definitely springboard me to think about like other types of big picture practice things, whether it's tarot related or life related or whatever.
So like if you got like a lot of, water or cups or whatever, and you're like, okay, so maybe there's some relationship things or interpersonal things that I want to work on, then does that ever like encourage you to adopt a new practice into your tarot practice to help work through that?
Yeah.
I guess
Yeah, it's kind of like the year ahead is almost like vision board, the first step of vision boarding, if that
that's
makes any
kind of
sense.
the energy I'm trying. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to like. That's what's
Yeah, because
going
you're thinking
on in
about
my head.
yeah, you're thinking about sort of like your practice, your life. Like for me, it's life.
Mm-hmm.
Practice is a part of that, but it's
Right.
like life as a whole. What is that telling me? So yeah, if I saw a lot of relationship stuff come in, it'd be like, okay, I'm probably going to do some goal setting around my relationships, and then
Mm-hmm.
based on the goal setting around my relationships, then I might build practices onto that. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like a step process where I start big picture, like really vague, and then I start getting specific, and then more specific, and then I start, because I'm not the type of person to set goals in a nebulous way. Like it's like, okay, I want to really focus on my marriage this year, right? Like if that's the thing, I'm not gonna stop there and be like, okay, well, what can I do? I could do a new weekly reading or something focused on that.
Mm-hmm.
I could do, all these kinds of things. You kind of, for me, I start big when I'm doing that kind of thing, and then I get more and more detailed. So do you do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I do, just in a general sense when I'm like going back through my tarot journal for the year.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm kind of looking at what's going on there, what things maybe have been coming up throughout this year that maybe I want to like address in the upcoming year. So I guess that's
Yeah.
kind of like the part of the tarot planning. So planning for your practice for the next year is like
Yeah.
part of that process for me is going through my journal from the year
Yeah.
and just spending some time with it and looking at what came up for me. It's one of the reasons why I do like to include like the pictures in my journal, because I can see if there's the same like types of cards coming up over and
Again
over
and
again.
again.
It's
Yeah.
a real you can do the same thing if you write it down, but like for me it's just because I'm a visual person, it's a great visual reference. Like, okay, I've seen like the 9 of Wands however many times this year or whatever it is. I'm just pulling
Yeah.
that card out. And so I'll use that as a way to kind of like look at things that I might want to incorporate, that I basically want to use tarot as a tool to help me understand or to help me navigate, because that's really what how I work with it. It's a tool to help me do whatever it is that I'm trying to do.
Yeah. So that actually makes me wonder, because I've done this in the past. I'm not doing it currently, but I'm curious if you do it. Do you do any kind of trackers, like to track what cards you're pulling, to look for how many times certain cards come up? Have you done that in the past? What are your feels?
So that's like fantasy self me. Fantasy self me wants to have the like beautiful card tracker that I make note of every time a card hits the table for me.
Yeah.
Reality me is a hot mess and that doesn't happen. So, I mean, I could maybe go back through my phone, because like this would have to be serious dedication, but I could go back through my phone, or I could go through my phone every week. So I take a picture of every reading I do regardless.
Yeah.
For the most part, unless it's a like real in the moment, I'm pulling a card for whatever reason. But 9 times out of 10, even if I'm doing that, I'm taking a picture because I'm probably going to send it to somebody. I'll be like, look at this card I got, or post it in a group or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I almost always have a visual record. But like as I'm verbalizing all this, I'm like, maybe to do that, it could like once a week go through my phone and be like, okay, here's all the cards I got this week. But that really is a fantasy self thing for me. I want the big tracker.
Yeah.
But I can't ever, like I've started one several times over the years, and I fell off the wagon real quick.
Well, let me validate you then, because I have done it successfully 2 different full years where I tracked the cards.
Wow, that's
and
awesome.
I had the pretty like tracker in my bullet journal, I think it was at the time.
Mhm.
And can I tell you, I did nothing with that data, and I didn't even know what I wanted to do with that data.
Mhm.
Like, unless something was, when you track for that long, what happens is that it's a big muddy mess. Like, like, unless there's something really obvious, like you literally are drawing, say, all wands cards. Like, I did color coding and everything for the suits, like, so I could at a glance see. And there's so much, for me anyways, the 2 years that I did it successfully, there was never anything super clear that jumped out at me. And I do patterns all the time. Like when I do a reading, especially if I'm reading for somebody else, I'm always, before I even going into card by card, I'm always looking at like balance of the elements, like how many majors, like are there repeating numbers, like what's the happening. But I could never find a pattern in a year worth of cards tracked. I could never get any benefit out of it. And I'd be so curious to hear from people who've done it, to hear what they've done with the data, because I feel like it was too many. I think if you tracked your cards for like a week and then analyzed that, I feel like I'd get more benefit out of that than a year, because it was just too much. I was just looking at it like, this is pretty. It's a pretty grid of little boxes I colored in and wrote numbers on, but like, I don't know what to do with it now. You could occasionally identify like a repeating card that would show up. Like, oh, I'm always getting the 7 of wands. But honestly, in a year, that card you think is stalking you, truly it isn't, when you see how many other cards you're pulling. So I don't know. I never could figure out what to do with it.
I'd be curious to know too. I think like for me, when I look at that, or think about doing something like that, when I look back at my tarot journal, okay, so me at the beginning of the year is not me at the end of the year. What I'm doing, what I'm into, what I'm like, I don't know. I apparently just have no attention span, because I'm like squirrel with everything. So whatever energy is I'm sitting with in January, it's going to be totally different come June, come November. And then, so it wouldn't, I don't even know how I would make any sense of that either, because that's not where I'm at anymore.
But you know what is really, really, really cool to do if you've never done it? Do you have Mary Kay Greer's Tarot for Yourself? Have you done that workbook?
Okay. Yeah, years ago, but yeah.
So there's an exercise in there where you literally figure out what your yearly tarot card was for like your whole life, basically. And you sort of track that against major life milestones. That was really cool and really wild. And I almost always find that my card of the year definitely connects to what is happening. Like in a really cool way. Like I'm coming out, this is a hermit year for me. Next year is a Wheel of Fortune year for me. The year prior was Strength. I can track major life events to that card of the year, no problem. And I mean, I don't know how much of that is just, this is my logical brain going, but like, I don't know how much of that is just that there's such major archetypes, you can always find things to apply to it on a yearly basis. I just feel like it's easier to look at data that's less, where there's less of it to parse in general. But that exercise is really cool, where you really look at what your year card is, what was happening in your life during that year, and kind of see that. I think that's cool.
That's a cool practice. A lot of people, I think, do that. They figure out their year. I've heard a couple of different ways to figure that out. How do you go about figuring it out?
My way is my month and my month. So the 2 digits of my month as a whole number, the 2 digits of the day of my birthday as a whole number, and then the 20. So the first 2 digits of the year, the first 2 digits of the last 2 digits of the year. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 2-digit numbers that I add up like that.
Right.
So then, and then I reduce it down.
Reduce it down. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been really, really effective and really cool. I actually use my card of the year as my digital journal cover. Like I put it onto my digital journal cover now using the Unicorn's Journey tarot image. I did that last year and this year now.
That's so cool. Yeah, no, that's a real popular. And I think it's a lot less work than a year ahead. So like, it's great if you want to do just like, I just want to do something that's kind of like a step into the new year energy. I think that's a great thing because just, you can figure that out. I have no idea what mine is, but I'll have to sit down and figure it out.
It's neat because you also progress in order typically, right? Like, so Hermit to Wheel of Fortune, next year should be the year after that should be Justice, and so on and so forth. And it's neat because you can really sort of track those bigger energies, which I like, and it's majors focused, which is also nice. But it's also a good springboard for things like you combine that with, say, a Wheel of the Year reading or with your word of the year or whatever, and you start to get these layers of sort of kind of things that create sort of a mental vision board for yourself for the year, which is nice too.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I do more. I don't feel like I do a ton of prep in terms of like that kind of stuff, like reading focused, but I do a lot of prep in terms of like what I need and the practices I'm going to do. So versus like the, year ahead style readings for myself, I'm more like, I'm going to engage with this practice and this practice, and I need this journal to do that. And maybe I need this deck because I'm going to like next year, I'm like, I want to do some alchemy work. So I've been slowly collecting materials over the last few months to help support that later on, so that like come the next year, I can, hopefully like slow roll into that. That's kind of more of the like sort of practice prep stuff that I do. I don't really do a ton of like reading stuff. I do a sort of month ahead energetic thing every month, but it's very energetic. It's not, I don't engage with it in a predictive way at all, because I know I will manifest that, right?
Yeah.
I know this about myself. So
yeah, it can actually be a real mood. It can affect your moods too. If you're like, if you, whether it's month ahead, even day ahead, if it's month ahead, year ahead, it can really like, if you know you're in like a 5 of Cups month, you might just literally manifest that mood for yourself, which I know is kind of what you're talking about, but it's like, it can really be a thing, and you have to know yourself and know how you engage with it, and then make sure that if you're doing a practice like that, it's actually benefiting you. I think sometimes we get kind of hung up on doing stuff because it seems to be the thing to do. And we don't always stop to analyze, is this actually beneficial to me though? Like, what am I getting out of this? Like, am I getting something good? And if I'm not, maybe I should ditch it and like do something different. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you do any kind of like, looking at what you're going to do, gathering materials, prep work in that way? Like more of the, I guess that's like mundane. It's mundane planning.
Kind of. I mean, like, for example, I know that I want to take a stab at the HelloQuest next year. So I've been like literally getting in the mood for like a while. Like, I've accumulated all these Arthurian like resources. I've already started like listening to the Mists of Avalon on Audible. Like, I've got like all these classics on my Kindle now that I can refer to. And just because I just think that'd be a really cool thing. It's already something I've got an attachment to. So I'm starting to gather those things and think about that and how I'm going to incorporate that into my practice in a way that's not overwhelming and won't be an issue for me, as I'm also doing things like I do deck study with my members and like this kind of stuff. So I want to make sure that I'm not stacking so much on that I just go, because that is a thing that I do sometimes.
I think that's a really good point. Like, when I'm kind of planning, and like I like to plan for it, because like my brain come January 1st, whatever, there's like a switch that flips, like new year, let's go. We're going to do all the freaking things.
Every time.
That's not feasible. That is fantasy self again. Right. And so I feel like for me, a lot of this sort of prep work, particularly towards like November, December, is to help mitigate that, so that I can look at it and go, okay, so I've been toying with, and I keep lists in my literal planner, of like things that I might want to engage with in the next year. And then I keep like sort of whittling it down. Okay, but do I really want to do this, or can I back burner this for a while because like I have other things that I need to do? So like there's like the alchemy thing, like that's sitting in that middle ground right now. We're not quite at the end of the year. So I'm like, am I really going to have time to engage with that in the way that I actually want to? Or again, is that fantasy self? So that kind of pre-planning of that helps me kind of whittle it down, because otherwise come January 1st, I'm like, these are the 20 things I'm going to do. And I'm like, yeah. And then I'm like overwhelmed, because I'm like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do all this in one day? I'm not. There's just,
And part of the problem I feel like is there's so many things you want to do, and you're like, I can do this in like a year, no problem. And then you start realizing that maybe not, like maybe that's not a thing, or like what if it doesn't like play out? And so it's kind of funny, because like the alchemy thing is such a good example. I'm like, some things I'm like, I keep wanting to do this like super major deep dive into alchemy. It's relevant because you brought it up. It's your fault. But no, I picked up like I think an easy-ish to read little book, and I'm just going to toss it up on my suggested books for us to vote on for book club at some point. And I'm like, that's what I'll do. I'll devote a couple of months reading a book, dipping my toes in, seeing where it goes from there. And I feel like that kind of thing, like because I kind of do the same thing you're doing, where I like to have a bit of an ongoing list of things that I'm interested in doing, either a deeper dive in, or whether it's, like I said, whether it's a deck I want to study or a subject I want to kind of dive into, you know? And I have to remind myself every single dang year that I'm allowed to dive into something and then reevaluate and stop if it's not working, like hop off again, you know?
Yeah. I also try to use that time to kind of like manage my own expectations with the thing, because there's a lot of times where I'll be like, okay, even when I've decided I'm going to do this thing, right? Whatever it is, I'm going to do this thing in the upcoming year. And like whatever schedule I've kind of put in my brain for it, like, okay, so it's like a thing a day. I can't do a thing a day. That does not work for me. There are days when I literally do not have the time to pull a card, like not even a card. So that's a good way for me to look at that and go, okay, so this particular thing requires this much time of me, or I need to reevaluate how I'm going to approach it, so that I'm not, like studies are a good thing. Like maybe if I want to do a deck study, like, okay, I could do a card a day. No, I can't. I don't have the time for that. As much as I might want to, and as much as I might be interested in studying that deck and doing the whole thing, like if I'm going to do it, I need to figure out sort of a time frame, a way to do it. Yeah. And for some things, particularly if they're like time-based or anything like that, like that's already inherently in there. So I need to be aware of that and see if that's something that I'm going to be able to manage. Like I'll be honest, like the deck and walk is like, it's a deck and it's every 10 days, right? No big deal. I got so far behind, because for me, not only does 10 days just go in a blink of an eye, and I'm like, oh, where was that? Wait, what decking are we in? Like
how?
Like, sorry, Marlena, but
I know I'm 3 whole seasons behind. I'm like, wait, I thought we were in water cards. Are we now back into like what's happening? I it's the same thing. I was like, I thought it was gonna be no big deal. And it's funny because I actually ordered, and this is just decking related, but I ordered a deck that through Kickstarter. Like I backed a deck through Kickstarter, and the entire deck is just like one card for each deck in. Super simple. And I'm like, you know what? This is great. Maybe next year I'll just pull whatever card. And this is if I can actually remember to do just this.
Yeah.
Just pull this one card. Don't have to get into all the tarot. Don't have to get into all the astrology. Just like pull a single card and maybe kind of low level track it. Because I was getting a lot of benefit out of it when I was doing it. But like you said, it's like goes so fast.
It goes so fast. Yeah. I found, talking about that one, I found for me, I was doing the deck videos related. That to me makes more sense in my brain. And that is something that I can like actually take that information and like regurgitate it into my own practice, into my own life in a way that makes sense. So working with astrological energies on even a 10-day period, that's just not something that's a part of my practice. It just isn't. I don't work with astrology in that way. But viewing my decks through a personified lens
It
of
worked out.
that's
Yeah,
perfect.
you were able to go, these are my Scorpio season decks or my Cancer season decks or whatever.
Yeah.
That was a cool way for you to broaden the subject. And this is actually a really good point probably to mention. Like, because I was talking about the HaloQuest, and this is a good example because that one, Candy just did an incredible video on the what you need to. Have you watched that yet?
No, but it's on my saved list. Yeah.
Oh, it's so good. And she talks about like the time and like how much, how she's done it versus like how it's laid out in the book. And one thing I think that I like to use this time of the year for is looking at the things that, and being really honest with myself. Like you talked about fantasy self and like how much you want to do versus how much you realistically can do. I might take that HaloQuest and look at the book, and because I think each lesson or each week has like a spread and journaling and meditation and like all these different layers. Maybe not every single one, but a lot of them do. So I might instead go maybe on the first month, I'll focus on just the meditations. The second month, I'll focus on just the readings, or maybe I'll pick one out of every 3 readings. So this is a good time of year to kind of look at what you want to do and then break it down into what's realistic, manageable, doable. How can you simplify? And I think 9 times out of 10, if I take something I want to do and break it down to its like simplest part, then if I have energy, time, etc. for more, I can add it, but I take the pressure off and I'm more likely to follow through with it.
That makes sense. It's like, I always say, like, I like winter better than summer because there's only so many clothes I can take off, right? So you can strip down. I don't know why. I don't know why this is the connection that's happening in my brain, but
I totally get what I'm picking up what you're putting down.
You can take it and make it naked, right? You can get that practice completely naked. And then as you have the time and the space, you can add to it. You can put on more clothes, right? So like, I don't know why that connection happened in my brain, but
it makes perfect sense to me.
It's strip it down to the bare bones. And that's kind of what I do in my planner and when I'm managing my own expectations about things. And like, let's be perfectly clear. I fall short all the time, or I get these grandiose ideas about this thing or that thing I'm going to do. And I start to do it. And then I realize either that doesn't actually work for me and that's cool, or I don't have the time and space to do it right now. So I'm going to back burner that. And I used to kind of like have guilt around that, but I don't anymore. I don't anymore because I'm not beholden to anybody else for all these things. And it can be hard too, especially when you put stuff out in a public way, whether it's on like a YouTube channel or just in a chat group or social group or whatever. You say you're really accountable. And while accountability, I think, is great, and it's great to be accountable to yourself and to others, like it's also important to know your own limitations. So
I struggle with that, honestly, because I get so much out of the practices that I do, and I always want to just add more. And I think part of it is almost as like, I don't want to say panic, that's way too strong of a word, but I always feel like there's just not enough time. And how can I find the time to do the things that are going to really enrich my practice or enrich my life? So it's like, I really want to do these things. But I think sometimes I get caught up definitely in biting off more than I can chew. So how can I simplify as much as possible? Okay, like next year, this is something I'm already evaluating. I've been spending some time evaluating lately. I want to do the HaloQuest, but I'm like, realistically, right? I want to do the narrative journey with you. And I'm like, okay, I know I'm going to be doing that.
That's my issue with the HaloQuest. I was like, uh-oh.
So I'm trying to decide what I might actually do is go through the HaloQuest and just literally pick individual exercises that I maybe would like to try to do by the time the year is out, but like not try to do this whole thing. Or like Candy talks about in her video, she doesn't do it according to the timeline. She's just doing it at her own pace and doesn't worry about if she's in the seasonal energy that is described at the time and just going with it. So I may do that too and just see how long it takes me instead of trying to say I'm going to do it in a year, just kind of like, maybe this is a thing I do touch base with weekly or monthly or something. And then if it takes 20 years, who cares? You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's something.
There's no time limit on any of it. Like for the most part, I mean, like there are a few things that are seasonally based, but like even that says who, like you don't have to, you can do it in your own way, in your own time. And also like, there's nothing wrong with putting something on the back burner and coming back to it later on, whether that's, whether it's just for the next few months or a year or 2 or 3 or whatever. I have practices that I have started and stopped and started and stopped over, the last decade.
Yeah.
And some of them I dip back in and out of, like, just whenever I feel like I'm ready to engage with that practice again. And some of it is just like, I'm still unsure about whether or not it's something that is really going to work for me. So I just like, I test the waters. I try a little.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Sample, bite, right? Take a little
Yeah.
bite and then put it away for a while.
That is actually how I learned a little bit about doing that when I used to do a lot of Lionheart's Instagram challenges, and I
Yes.
still occasionally do. But in the beginning, I would do them religiously, like every single month, every single day. I was pulling for a Lionheart's challenge, and that was really, really fun for me. But at a certain point, I realized it had become a little too routine. I wasn't getting the kind of depth out of it. So now I dip in and I dip out. I might do one sometimes, not other times. And I do the same thing with a lot of the practices I engage with. I dip into the ones sort of I feel like I need or that I'm catching, that are catching my attention. And even then, I'm like a total renegade. I'll pull, it'll be like, oh, pull this card every day. It's like, no, how about once a week I pull the 5 cards that you prompted for the week? You know, I do that all the time too.
Yeah.
So,
I do too. There's like, I say that, do that a lot with like my member stuff because, you know, it's the whole guided practice, but like, I don't always do it. I wrote the thing. I don't always do it the way it's written. I'm just like, nope, I'm not feeling that today. So I'm not going to use those positions, or I'm not going to use that spread, or it's that there's pull 3 cards. Nope. I'm going to pull 8. It's just because it doesn't matter. There's no rules. I would say it's not homework. It's not homework.
I think that's the thing is I know that I have the tendency to make everything homework.
Yeah, I do too, which is why I have to remind myself that it's not homework. Yeah.
I have to sort of actively work on it for sure.
Because I'm weird and I like homework. So
yeah.
Writing papers in school. Oh my goodness. I would get so excited when it was time to write a paper in school. Like,
papers were the best. I would far prefer papers than like memorization for a test or something. I love doing papers.
No, just let me write a paper on it. I will dazzle you with depths that I will plumb with that paper. But
1000%.
Memorize my timetables.
Not happening. I'm pretty sure I still don't know them. Yeah.
Because remember when they said you wouldn't have a calculator in your pocket? Do you remember
that? Lied.
They lied.
Liars.
We have not only a calculator, but a whole computer in our pocket.
Yep, in our pocket all the time.
All the time. So
Google can translate, can do my math for me. Yep, it's great.
It's the same thing as the permanent record.
Do you
remember that? It's going to go on your permanent record.
What does that even mean?
It doesn't even exist. It's not a thing. Scared the hell out of you when you were a kid, though, because you were like, don't put it on my permanent record.
What is that? I don't want that.
That's a thing. Like, you become an adult and you're like, where is this permanent record that I've heard about my whole life? I'm so off on a tangent. Not even tarot related. Okay, sorry.
It's all right. I'm with you.
That was my tangent. It's like a coffee and cards all over again.
It's the best. I love these kinds of chats. This just made me think of that. Do you plan like a monthly, do you plan the decks for the whole year ahead that you want to work with? Do you do that? Or do you plan, well, you kind of do because you do the monthly medicine. I was going to say, or do you plan like energetic themes for the month?
I plan energetic themes. I do set out a few that I'm like, these are decks that I would like to work with, but it's usually because there's like some reason, right? It's related to a practice, or it's a deck that I've had for, 5 years. And I'm like, why do I still have this? I need to check it out. So I'll like try to set the intention to do that. I think I do a video on it every year, actually. Like the decks I want to work with in the next year. I think I do.
You do. Yeah.
It's in my schedule. It's in my schedule for January. Decks I want to work with for 2023. For 2024. So I do set a few things out like that, but in terms of like a month to month thing, I do have the theme because of we were doing monthly medicine. Now we're going to do the adventure next year. But I will say that when I sit down to pick out the decks, I will kind of get a selection of decks, and then that may change though. So like, I'm not beholden to that list. I'll get them out just so that they're out and here on hand. I have a little basket to put them in. But if I come into like the week or particular reading or whatever, and I'm like, I'm just not feeling that deck, I'll just put it away and grab another because life.
That's fair.
But I do like working with the themes. It's probably why I created the whole practice in the way that I did, because I feel like it gives me like a cohesive thing to like root my practice into that month, regardless of the context of the practice. I've got thematic sort of energetic root in there that I like to have. So
Yeah. Gives you
how about
something
you?
to sort of build on.
Yeah, it gives me something to work with. Yeah.
Yep.
How about you? Do you pick out your decks ahead of time?
No, other than like what you said, I will probably pull out a few that I want to make sure I get to, like spend some
Mhm.
time with in the year ahead. But no, not really. I kind of like to fly by the seat of my pants a little bit. I usually decide most things like right towards the end of the month for the next month, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I'll kind of have an idea of what I want to be working with. But even then, like you said, I'll change it up.
Mhm.
I used to religiously rotate my decks weekly. I don't do that as much now. I'm now more likely to rotate more monthly than I am
Mhm.
weekly. But that's usually because I nowadays I have a deck study deck on the go pretty much
Right.
at all times, and then I also have whatever deck I'm personally wanting to sort of prioritize that month. So that's kind of two to rotate, and then
Mhm.
if I get bored, I'll throw other stuff in the mix.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of how it is now.
I think that's good. Yeah. I have months on occasion where I will just like I'm just gonna work with for whatever reason, I'll just have like one or two decks, and that's just all I will work with. Particularly for practices, sometimes I will do that. If it's very thematically heavy or I don't have the space and the attention span to like go through the process of finding other decks to work with, then I'll just be
Yeah,
like, these are I've done that a few times with monthly medicine where I'm like, okay, these are the like the tarot and the oracle that I'm going to use for the whole month for that practice.
yep,
But then I do have other practices that I do that those decks wouldn't necessarily align with. So then I will get into other decks. But
yeah,
it really is dependent on the practice that I'm doing.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
And I like to rotate them just because I like to make use of my collection. Like I have
Same.
all these gorgeous decks. Like I want to see them all. So
I know. Harken back to the days when I said I was never going to have more than 52, because then I'd always have a deck per week. Those days are long past.
yeah.
Um, but I do like to rotate a lot of things for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And plus, sometimes it's just like it's a mood thing, right?
Yeah.
Whatever is going on in terms of practices or whatever. It's like the other day, I was feeling angsty for some reason. I'm like, I'm gonna pull out beautiful creatures because I'm feeling angsty, and that's just a good deck for that.
Good
And
angst deck. Yeah.
it's a good angsty deck. I paired it with the villains.
Ooh, how was
Good.
that?
It was
I was
good.
just gonna say that sounds like a good pairing.
It's a good pairing, and it's a good like kind of angsty inner teenager pairing.
Yeah.
But those
Ooh.
aren't decks that I actually like use in any sort of practice. They're just decks that I keep on hand because they are a mood, right? Those
Mhm.
decks are a mood for me. So,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's not to say that I wouldn't use them for particular practices. I don't have a tendency to. So,
Yeah.
okay, should we do we want to dip into a little bit of just like planning in
Sure.
general? So, in addition to like planning for tarot, what kind of planning do you do just like in general? Like cuz
So much
we
planning.
love planning.
Yeah, so much planning. I literally would not be able to function without planning. Like, and it's funny because I'm not the type of person to plan like hours and days specifically, but I
Mhm.
have to have a weekly task list. I
Mhm.
have to have like a monthly like content plan, and I do that months in advance,
Mhm.
my rough plan, and then I get more specific each month. But so a lot of my planning came about, like the necessity for planning came about because of YouTube.
Mhm.
And then I built on it. I've become so reliant on it for YouTube that I became reliant on it for everything else too. But I
Yay.
don't have a lot of like engagements, appointments, things like that. I have some of that, but very, very little, I feel like. So, and I'm not like running children. Running children? That's not the right way to say that. What is the right way to say that? Managing children? I don't
Well, I mean, I was
know.
thinking running, like running children around
That's
or
what I'm thinking.
yeah,
Yeah, like no soccer games, like so I don't
yeah.
have all that stuff to deal with.
Mhm.
But I definitely have so many things I feel like always on the go. Like I have a whole separate planner I keep at work for day job stuff. But like
Right.
for life stuff, I feel like it's like keeping track of things that I help Peggy with the Etsy shop, keeping track of stuff that I do for YouTube, keeping track of the stuff for decks,
Mhm.
books, like all this crap. It's not
Right.
crap. All the stuff that I'm working on all the time. But
Yeah.
if I don't have a task list to know like what do I need to try to accomplish this week to like check off, I'm
Mhm.
floundering like for real.
Mhm.
And I'm referring to it many, many times in a day.
Yeah.
Like wild. I plan so much stuff.
I do too. I live by lists. Like
Yeah.
I do not know what I would do without lists. I have lists like everywhere in every book planner device, whatever, there's lists. I'm trying, I'm working on consolidating them all to just 2 things now. So that's what I'm going to try for 2024. I have my Hobonichi, which is my weekly, like keep me focused weekly task list thing. And then anything that I have, like I'm same as you. I don't have a ton of like appointments or, you know, things like that. I don't have little kids I'm running around either anymore. So it's really just like if I have, you know, an event schedule or chat or something like that, or just today, a lot of times like in my weeks, it's like today was an editing day because you know what? I spent most of my day editing or recording or whatever it is. And but I have on the other side, I have that task list that that is what I live by. And then I've been playing with Notion as well to keep big project planning rather than.
I haven't let myself even look at it because I've heard it's a bit of a rabbit hole.
A bit of a time suck. And one of the things, the reason that I was like only using it for big project planning was because I will so go down that rabbit hole and I will spend forever like tweaking the thing because I spent a lot of years being a web designer. So there's stuff in there that like it drives my brain crazy because it's like it needs to be correct. And I'm like, I don't have time to do that. Like that is a distraction. And you can like make it pretty. So there's that, right?
So my problem with stuff like that, like I used to keep Trello boards and things like that. I don't know if you ever used Trello. My problem with this is where I get myself into the weeds every time. Luckily I've not gone down the rabbit hole to like try to make things too cute. Like I definitely have like sticker packs and stickers I use, but they're functional stickers. They're cute functional stickers, but they're functional, right? Like an appointment sticker, you know.
Right.
By the way, speaking only about digital planning now because that's where I keep everything these days. But where I get into the weeds is the actual act of organizing stuff, like organizing the information, planning the things, figuring out how I'm going to lay out the plans. That becomes a thing that I can lose so much time to. I get so into the weeds. It's just fun. I love to compartmentalize things. If you give me a way to put things in separate boxes, I'm going to do it. And then I'm going to find extra separate boxes to break those up into even further.
Right.
So like, the reason that I feel like I focus so hard on working on a weekly plan instead of a daily plan, although I'm moving more into dailies, I think next year, because I just need more space. But the reason I focus primarily, like my main homepage on my planner is always a weekly, is it keeps me from doing that because I was the type to always like be like, I'll drag this task to Monday and this task to Friday and this task to Sunday, and then when things go awry, as they always do, because life is life, I'd feel like a failure or I'd feel like I messed it up. And so I had a really bad habit of over planning. So now it's like I look at the week as a whole and I just try to get that stuff done. However, I get it done by the time the week is over. And most of the time that way, I'm successful. Yeah.
That's exactly what I do too, because otherwise I would be like, and it's, you know, for an example, like yesterday, just like real life stuff, right? I was gonna do a bunch of editing and everything, and then Ash got home early from school and was like, hey mom, do you want to go, you know, get some coffee and do some shopping and whatever? Like, I'm gonna say no to that, right? In my plan. And if I had something scheduled, like I was gonna, you know, then I'd have to move that task to a different day, and I'm like, it's no big thing because now I can just do that other thing later on the week or whatever. And I like that flexibility.
I was just gonna say, this is actually a good point, and I think it applies to tarot plans or practices as well as like just mundane stuff. Is like, I don't know about you, but I find that if I'm too specific in the things I want to accomplish and the timeline I want to accomplish them in, what ends up happening is I have as a personality a tendency to get very attached to those plans. So your example just then was perfect because that's the kind of trap I would set for myself all the time. But today's my filming day, and then I lose out on an opportunity to do something neat with my wife or whatever, instead of like, okay, I need to get this done sometime this week, so it's fine. But tarot can be the same way. Like we plan, like the HoloQuest, I'm going to keep coming back to that because it's on my mind. But like with that, it'd be really easy for me to lock myself down and go, if I don't accomplish all these tasks in this set period of time, it's like a flop, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's important to like find ways to keep your plans, let your plans serve you so that you're not serving your plans.
Yeah. I think flexibility is really, really important because like life is just going to happen. And I would, and that's kind of the reason why I started doing more weekly stuff, because I did used to plan like daily. This is the tasks I'm going to complete today.
Yeah.
And now I just do like broad range things. I'm going to edit today. I'm going to record today. I'm going to
Yes.
today, whatever it is. And that is just so that as I'm looking at my week, I know that I need at least 2 days of recording, right?
Mhm.
So wherever that happens, and I can loosely plan it in there, but it also, like you were saying, means I'm not going to miss out on other opportunities. I don't know how people do the hourly plans. That would drive my brain crazy. If I had something scheduled in a planner that said at 9 a.m. I had to do this, like on a daily basis, or 10 a.m. I had to do that, like that would drive my brain crazy, because if I didn't hit that deadline, that would be just devastating for my whole day. It would ruin my whole day.
Yeah, I actually did this. I tried this thing for a while where it's like you plan out your perfect day for a weekday, or you plan out well, actually, it was like planning out your perfect week. How would you time block? When would you accomplish certain types of tasks in certain times of the day for an entire week? Like block out time for like leisure, block out time for meals, block out time for like exercise and for this and for that. And then with the time that's left, piecemeal it up and like divide up your tasks for the week generally, like editing, filming, etc., etc. I tried to do that, and there was this whole video I watched, and I was so inspired. And it was like doing it in Google Calendar, so you always have these like colored blocks for like what should be happening at any given time of your day. And it
Right.
was great for like a week. And then I was like, I felt like, again, I felt like my plans were running me, but a schedule was running me. I wasn't in charge of my life. Like I couldn't, like, and then every time I was doing something different in a block, I'd be like, oh, I'm not supposed to be doing that. And so I'd be so not productive because I was constantly making myself shift gears when I didn't need to. I could have just been productive at the thing I was doing.
Yeah. I think that's important for doing tarot practices and stuff, because I'm thinking of things like moon readings.
Yes.
Or, things like that, not to pick on moon readings, but
No.
like time specific readings like that. If I used to fall into the trap of like, okay, so it's the new moon or whatever. So if I'm going to do a new moon reading, I need to do it on the new moon, right?
Yep.
Again, says who, right?
Yeah.
Rules that I make up in my own brain. And so
Yep.
I've had to learn to kind of like do that with my tarot practice too, of being a bit more flexible with when I'm doing things and how I'm doing things. Like even with the practice that I was doing this year, we had a Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. I don't do it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday a lot of the time. Like it may be Tuesday. Maybe I'll do them all in one week. It doesn't matter. That schedule is just there to help keep things in order, organized. But
9 times out of 10 when I'm doing your things, I'm usually doing like I'm either doing only like I think it was like the Wednesday. I would do only the Wednesday, or I would combine Wednesday with the other days and do it all on one day most of the time. And I think it's just because I don't know about you or anybody else, but I'm not always in the right headspace to really pay attention to a tarot reading. And I've learned over the years that if I just do it because I feel like I'm supposed to do it at that time of the day or on that day, I don't get anything out of it. But if I'm like in the mood, I'll get so much out of it. So I kind of, it's like, I do the same thing with filming. I do the same thing with client readings. I have to be in the headspace. And then I maximize my use of that headspace.
Right. Yeah. It's not, like I said, it's not homework. Like none of it should be homework. So if it starts feeling like homework, like not the good kind of homework. It starts feeling like homework, like if it starts feeling like an obligation. And I think that a lot of people run into this when they're like setting out to do particular practices. Like I want to do a moon reading every month, or I want to do an energetic check-in every month, or whatever it is, or I want to do it once a week. Then I think that when you get locked into that, it can get to the point where you're not always feeling it. And then it becomes like habitual in a way that's not productive, because there's habitual that keeps you nourished and keeps you going. And then there's habitual that you're just going through the motions. And I've definitely found myself doing that with some practices, because I set out to do this thing or the other. Right. And I'm like, and it happens on a particular time, or I've decided it's going to happen on a particular time. And then when I fall short of that, it's like, well, I ruined it now. It's done. I ruined it.
I do the same thing. I really try consciously to like really intentionally not create obligations around my practices. If they're there to support me and to help me grow or to help me be the best me or whatever, then if they're coming from a place of obligation, I'm defeating the purpose. So I try to make sure that I'm coming at it, even if it means I'm being super like flaky in a way about my stuff. It's like if I'm not in the right space to get what I need out of it, this isn't the right time to do it.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And sometimes, and I will say there's a caveat that sometimes it's worth it to sort of push yourself a little through that moment, you know. But for me, it's that whole constant just keeping an eye on has this become just routine, just obligation, or am I getting something? Am I being nourished by it? Like you said, like there's habits that nourish and there's habits that kind of bind us. And so, yeah.
Like we were talking about at the beginning, like this just that time of year. So I like to start thinking about it so that it doesn't like blindside me come January when that little switch in my head like flips and is like, let's do this.
Yeah. Because what is it about January? Like January rolls around and we all feel like we have to be super productive and super goal oriented. And it's like, it's in the air. And I know some of that is like resolution mindset and all this other kind of stuff. But man, I try not to get on the hype train, and I do every year about something.
Same.
Yeah.
It never fails, but I think just being aware of it is helpful.
Half the battle,
half the battle is being aware of it and just being like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. But I think that kind of that pre-planning for me that helps mitigate a lot of that, because otherwise, man, I'm like January and I'm gonna do these 20 things, all of it at once, and then I'm like, the second week of January rolls around and I'm like, okay, half of them are by the wayside and the other half I'm completely overwhelmed by.
Listen, I guarantee you, in spite of this conversation, by mid-January, I'm going to realize I've made a mistake somewhere. I'm just waiting to find out where it's going to be. Yep.
As always, would love to hear from you all, what you plan, what you do. Let us know about the year ahead thing, because I'm just your head spread. I'm just fascinated. And the data tracking.
I really want to hear about the data tracking too.
So let us know if you do a year ahead spread and do you track your cards? And if so, what do you do with that data?
What do you do with the information?
We want to know.
Yep. Yep. And if you have unique things that you do around tarot planning, let us know that too. Because I'm looking for more stuff to pile on myself for January so I can drop half of it by February.
Absolutely. We love to add to our list. So absolutely. Any ideas you have, throw them our way.
Yes,
that's cool. I add that to my list too.
Yes. Yep. Help fill our lists.
All right. Well, thank you for coming and hanging out with me again. We will
be having me. I love these.
Back on your channel for the are we in the new I don't know when yet.
Nope.
Stay tuned, but it'll be on Lisa's channel next time.
On a different subject. We don't know what that is yet. We'll keep you posted.
Because this is us managing our own expectations around this practice of talking about tarot in practice.
Yeah. Look at us walking the talk.
Right? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us, and we will chat with you again next time on Lisa's channel.
See y'all later.
Bye.
Bye.